The New Orleans Saints just hit the reset button. Will it finally pay off? After years of treading water, the Saints made a bold move, hiring Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator Kellen Moore as their new head coach. Moore just helped lead the Eagles to a championship, but can he bring that success to New Orleans? This offseason, the Saints have tough cap decisions, key free agents, and holes to fill on both sides of the ball. So today, we're breaking down how Kellen Moore's scheme fits the Saints roster, what they can do in free agency with their cap situation, and how they should attack the 2025 NFL Draft. Let's get into it. All right, let's recap the 2024 season for the Saints. The head coach was Dennis Allen. The team went 5-12 and now has the 9th pick in the draft. The team started out 2-0 with 91 points scored in the first 2 games, so they were looking like one of the best teams in football at the start, running the ball, taking shots off play action. Unfortunately, they couldn't keep it going. The team lost 7 straight games. It should be noted that the team was 5-5 with Derek Carr as the starting quarterback. Unfortunately, when he wasn't able to play for 7 games this year, the backups went 0-7, so that makes the record look maybe a little bit worse than what it would have been, could have been, with a healthy starting quarterback the whole year. Let's look at their 2024 EPA per play numbers. Offensively, they were 22nd in the passing game, again, having a backup quarterback almost half the year, and 11th in the run game, surprisingly, higher than I thought they would have come in. Defensively, they were 13th against the pass, but 30th against the run, allowing just shy of 5 yards per carry. The rookie first-round pick was Talise Fuaga, who started 17 games at left tackle, only gave up 6 sacks, looked like a pretty good player. If a player can play at an average level as a rookie, that usually bodes well for him, for the team going forward. The top free agent acquisition was Chase Young. He signed a 1-year, $13 million fully guaranteed contract and provided them 5.5 sacks. He wasn't technically a starter for any of the games, but he did play more snaps than Cameron Jordan, who's been getting on up there in years, and ultimately was a big part of their defensive end rotation. Now, GM Mickey Loomis is returning for year number 24. He's been there a long time, so for the most part, it's probably going to be business as usual for the Saints as far as managing the team. We'll talk about how they manage their team in a moment. Kellen Moore is, again, the new head coach at 35. He's now the youngest current head coach in the National Football League. So we can talk a little bit about his scheme just briefly. I would say that he tends to run a scheme which is a little bit heavier in the zone run game, a little bit heavier in using different formations, motions, tempo, trying to not go too crazy with running a whole bunch of different plays. If you look at some of his interviews and things that he's talked about, I thought it was cool. When he was interviewed by John Gruden coming out of college, he talked about how they did things at Boise, and he said, we try to keep it simple for our guys. We use formations and motion, but we basically run our core plays in just a bunch of different ways. And then the same thing when he was introduced as the Chargers head coach. He gave that same philosophy, explained his philosophy the same way. So if you look back at his time as an offensive coordinator, this year in Philly, they were the number 1 run team in terms of run rate. In LA with the Chargers, they were a heavy pass team. In Dallas, they were a little bit heavier in pass team as well. So he's shown a willingness to mix up his scheme depending on the personnel that he has, and that bodes very well for the Saints going forward. We have to mention very early in this whole discussion that the Saints are $59.5 million over the cap effective. So that's the amount of money that they'll need to reduce their cap by in order to be able to fill out the roster and sign free agents. They're going to want to reduce it by more than that in order to plug a couple holes in free agency or re-sign some players that are going to want some premium money to come back. So they have a lot of work to do. The Saints, here's how I can explain it. The Saints really value consistency with their personnel. They like to keep people around. They like for people to play out their contracts. And they're not afraid to put money into future years to try to get the most out of every year. So that's the way they've always done business. It's not going to substantially change. Much of what they're going to do to get under the cap is going to involve restructuring players. Let's talk about a few things that they can do here. So offensive line Ryan Ramczyk is likely going to retire. He's had a knee condition that hasn't gotten better for a couple of years. and they restructured him already. The writing's on the wall there. He's as good as retired. Defensive end Cam Jordan may get squeezed as far as money. He could end up retiring. He's got a $20 million cap number, and that just isn't going to work for the player that he is right now. I could still see him coming back at a lower salary, but ultimately could also ride off into the sunset. Don't really see him playing anywhere else as long as he's been anywhere else, but we'll have to see on that. So they'll probably shake some money free from there. And the big question that they're going to have is what to do with quarterback Derek Carr. Kellen Moore had a press conference today. He was very non-committal. I wouldn't, currently read too much into that. Basically, at the moment, it doesn't make sense for them to cut Derek Carr today just because of the dead money that they would incur. They could, however, put him as a post-June 1st cut. And here's how the money lines up. It would be $30 million that they would save in 2025 if they designate him a post-June 1st cut. And that could help them to sign draft picks and operate during the season and so on and so forth. $30 million is not bad for a guy who's a pretty solid starting quarterback. A lot of people are going to probably, I can hear you guys hitting with the door closed, but Derek Carr, when he was in the lineup last year, he was a borderline top 10 quarterback in the league based on his passing efficiency numbers. And, a lot of the reasons to potentially move on from him, you would have to say would be that he's in his mid-30s. He's had injuries. He missed almost half the year. What, is he going to get more healthy now? So I hear that side of it, and I could see them moving on. But based on, he was pretty good when he played last year, and I don't really know that there's anyone out there that you want to plug in right away. You could try to find a less expensive bridge quarterback. That might be possible. But I just don't know whether the juice is worth the squeeze to move on right now. Next offseason, yeah, maybe. The one after that, for sure. He's only got 2 years left on his deal. So you're not looking at, you're looking to find someone to develop. But anyway, I would probably hold on to him and try to make it work around that. There's a lot else they can do. Taysom Hill had a bad injury. He's likely to be a post-June 1st release. That will save them significant money. And then they're going to need to restructure a lot of core players. They got a couple offensive linemen, McCoy Ruiz, linebackers, Davis and Werner are their starters. On the D-line, Granderson and Shepard, and at safety, Tyrann Mathieu. So some of these players are either getting on up there in years, like Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, or just not all that effective, like Shepard on the D-line. So you can definitely question some of these restructures. This is what makes you nervous about the way that the Saints run their team. You would ideally like the chance to pick through your players every year and decide who you want to continue to invest in and who you don't. The way that the Saints run their team means that they don't have as many choices as other teams do. A lot of times it's about keeping the guys around, pushing money around, and just trying to develop and coach up the guys that you have. That's part and parcel of being here. So they will need to also probably trim a few veteran role players. I'm not going to go into detail about who that's going to be. I don't like to call for people's jobs, but there are probably a half dozen people that they could potentially get rid of there, save another 15 or 20 million. And then I think they need to look at extending Chase Young at tight end and potentially Juwan Johnson, at defensive end, and then Juwan Johnson at tight end. So these two guys have combined about $15 million in dead money this year. Their contracts are going to void, but if the Saints can work out extensions with those players, they can probably keep them around, filling some needs, and also giving them backloaded multi-year deals to where they would not have a big cap hit this year. In other words, Chase Young would pay him $9 million not to play for the team. They could potentially pay him a smaller amount or a smaller cap hit in the first year of like a 3 or 4 year extension. So that's another way they can extend some players as well to clear out some cap space. So assuming that they're able to, accumulate those moves and clear out about 70 million, 75 million. Here's some potential re-signings. A lot of these are a little bit more on the inexpensive side. So Marcus Valdes-Scantling played about half the year and was very effective in the time that he did play. For a projected price tag of $1.5 million, he would be a very cost-effective re-signing potentially. Juwan Johnson, again, he has a void in his contract, and he could come in around $10 million. I can see it being less than that. That was a projection I saw in the media, but I think that a secondary complimentary receiving tight end to Foster Moreau. He's a pretty solid player still. Lucas Patrick actually played pretty well on the interior of the offensive line for $2 million a year. He played a lot of snaps last year, so at $2 million, that would be probably a good deal. Chase Young is going to be the big item. Again, his contract's going to void. He's projected to come in at about $17.5 million. 3-year deal in that neighborhood would make sense and would certainly fill a need with Cameron Jordan reaching the end of his career. So I think they'd like to do that if they can find the money to make it happen. And then Paulson Adebo is another player, but fortunately, he only played 7 games last year because he broke his femur, actually. But he's only 25. He's been a starting corner, developing into a good player. And at a price tag projected at just $11.1 million, they could get a little bit of a bargain based off the fact that he's coming off of an injury. Try to get him on a multi-year deal if you can, or even just 1-year deal. But I think you need to keep him around as a starting corner. Otherwise, it's going to be a big need that you're going to need to fill. Here's some other positions where they need some depth or competition. So at running back, apart from Alvin Kamara, there really isn't too much there. Defensive tackle, they just haven't gotten good play in there. Brian Brzee has really struggled. Nathan Shepard, among others. And then at free safety and slot DB, I would like for them to find some competition. Alontae Taylor has been the slot DB. He was a good blitzer, but struggled in coverage and run support last year. And then at free safety, deep safety, they've got some guys there like Tyrann Mathieu. But I think most of the guys they have are better in the box. So if you can find a guy who is better playing deep, I think that you would like that as well. And then just as far as development, I think they need to find a quarterback to develop behind Derek Carr. And then at linebacker, again, you got Demario Davis, you got Pete Werner, you got a couple other young guys, but I'm not sure that there's anyone they feel like can be a long-term starter. So that's a kind of a low priority spot. But looking into the draft, they have an extra 3rd-round pick and 4th-round pick, no 5th-round pick. That's as a result of the Lattimore trade. All right, let's take a look at a 3-round mock draft. So in the first round with the 9th overall pick, I have Saints going with Michael Williams out of Georgia. He's a defensive end prospect, interesting guy. I've been watching some this week. Played a lot of 4-eye, so a little bit inside the offensive tackle, not as much of an edge rusher in college. You're going to have to project him into that role. But he's got the size, 6'5", 265, prototypical defensive end size. Does a really good job changing direction. If you watch the way that he defends, some of the read option stuff, he can stay with 1, 2, 3 fakes and still go get the quarterback. And that's very impressive to me. They're going to have to take a look and see what they can do to develop him as a guy just coming off the edge on 3rd down. But I think he can step in right away as a good run defender who has the athletic traits to project into an impact pass rusher into the future. A couple other guys I thought about here. Campbell on the offensive line, if you took him, you could either play him at right tackle and kick for Penning inside, which would be good because Penning's really struggled as a pass protector, or you could put Campbell at the left tackle and then Fuaga at right tackle and then kick Penning inside. But Fuaga played well on the left side. There's a lot of people that don't know if Campbell's a left tackle anyway because they're shorter arms, so I didn't decide to go there. Ashton Genty, some people have connected that. Could be the best player on the board. It could happen. And then Tyler Warren at tight end. Maybe if you don't re-sign Juwan Johnson, maybe this is a way to get another impact player into the offense. If you're Kellen Moore, is that something that would intrigue you as far as building your offensive scheme? In the 2nd round, with the 8th pick, 4th overall, I have them going with quarterback Jalen Milroe from Alabama. Divisive player. I think this is going to be a divisive pick. I think there are people that will look at it and say, what a waste. This guy can't play. I'm here to tell you, it is not that different from the Jalen Hurts pick. This is a guy who can come in. Definitely, I understand if you say that there's a low floor with the player. He might not work out, but he is a special athlete. If you watch what he did to LSU, he broke that defense down with his legs and really just made them look silly. On top of that, he throws a pretty deep ball. So I think there's a lot to be developed as far as his footwork, as far as his short to intermediate game, as far as understanding the timing. You don't really need that many quick game concepts in an offense, though. If he can get like 2 or 3 concepts that he's really comfortable with, teach him mesh. Give him a guy he's comfortable throwing a slant to. Give him some things that he can throw off anticipation, spacing, stick, I don't care. But if you can make him just comfortable enough in that area, what he can do with his legs and what he can do throwing the deep ball is so impressive. He could really be an electric player in this league. And at the 2nd round, I would take that gamble. And furthermore, I think Kellen Moore, this is the best place for Jalen Milroe to go because you got a new quarterback. He's probably got some runway to be there for probably at least 3 or 4 years. He's going to be in charge of the offense. He's going to be in charge of his development. So there's a potential for stability is what I'm trying to say. And I think that Kellen Moore would do a good job. He's coached Dak. He's coached Jalen. He could understand how to put an offense together around a mobile quarterback. And to be honest with you, I like Jalen Milroe, and I want it to work out for him. I think he's a good kid. I think he'll work hard, and that's part of it as well. But anyway, Jalen Milroe in the second round, I love the pick. You look at a running back, receiver, offensive line, definitely all things that you could do here at this spot based on the players that were on the board. In the third round, I have them going with Caleb Johnson with the 71st pick out of Iowa. He is a zone scheme back who brings a power element. I've seen him comp to Tyler Algier, who may not impress a lot of people, but this is a guy that has been very productive in the NFL. Caleb Johnson just runs angry. There are spots where I watch him run, and it's like, you really could have ran around that guy. You didn't have to run through him, but he'll do it anyway. And he's a big enough back that he can certainly steamroll some smaller DBs. So I did look at Deion Walker as a big defensive tackle who has the potential to be a good run stopper, but just doesn't play like it right now. So I decided not to go that route with Caleb Johnson instead. In the third round, with their second third rounder, 93 overall, I went with Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M. Seems like all the defensive linemen from Texas A&M have good physical traits and better physical traits than what their production showed this year. So Turner's a guy, again, I think he would be a little bit developmental, but I think he will give you a good chance to get better play out of your defensive interior, which would be a hard thing for them right now. They've got some money wrapped up in those guys, but I think a mid-round draft pick could potentially help their run defense out, which is a big need for them right now. So I also looked at Jack Bash or offensive lineman like Belton out of NC State. Jack Bash would be a tough one because he'd be a player that would help him out a lot at receiver. Actually, I think he'd be a good complementary piece there. His brother actually passed away in the terrorist attack at the Sugar Bowl, so I don't know if he'd want to go play in New Orleans. It's an interesting question because on the one hand, if people are trying to do terrorism, they're trying to make you afraid, and maybe the ultimate kind of blank you to that would be to say, hey, I'm going to go play in the same place, that you tried to make me afraid from. You know what I mean? But at the same time, mentally, it would be a tough deal to put a young man in that situation. So interesting kind of to think about. Would that be, I don't know. So, with all that being said, we spent a lot of time on the Saints cap situation. That's a tough thing that they're going to need to deal with. But at this time, they've kind of taken their shot at this new era. Whether Kellen Moore can turn this team into a contender does remain to be seen. With a tight cap, to say the least, key free agents, and a roster that still needs a lot of work, this offseason is going to be critical into their future. So what do you think? First of all, did they make the right hire with Kellen Moore? Is he going to be able to be successful in New Orleans with everything they have going on with the cap situation? And going forward, what is the number one move the Saints need to make this offseason? Is Jalen Milroe a good developmental quarterback? Is there something else that they need other than Mykel Williams in the first round to make their team better? So, please drop your comments and thoughts below. Let's talk about it. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff so you don't miss tomorrow's breakdown. And we're going to be looking into the New York Jets next as they try to navigate life after Aaron Rodgers. Until next time, I'm Ben Jackson. Thanks for tuning into my podcast, and I'll see you in the next one.